thank you very much for joining us today. Very, very much appreciated that you're here. This is the third in a series of monthly webinars being organised in conjunction between the European Aviation Conference Institute and GARS, the German Aviation Research Society. And you may recall, if you've been watching along, this is the third one. As I said, in January, we talked about cargo as sort of a follow-on from the December conference that was held in Luxembourg the year before, obviously. And then last month, we had a conversation with someone specifically on what AI is and what it might mean for the future. But today, we're sort of putting those two things together. And today, we're going to talk about cargo and AI and how AI will impact and influence what's going on in the cargo industry. And we've got two really terrific speakers that I think will help us enormously with that. Let me first introduce Mr. Glyn Hughes, who is the Director General of TIACA, which is the organisation that represents pretty well everything to do with cargo, from agents to airlines to everything else in between. And Mr. Oliver Ditz, who is with the Fraunhofer Institute for Material Flows and Logistics. I hope I got that right. He works in the aviation logistics area, which of course is exactly the right place to be working if you're going to be talking about AI and those sorts of things. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Perhaps, Glyn, if I can ask you first, and I mean, this is going to come out wrong, and I mean it nicely. You've been in the industry for quite a long time. And at one level, AI is nothing more or less, is it not, than the continuation of what the industry has been trying to do for a very long time, which is to standardise everything.
Yes, well, first of all, Andrew, thank you very much for inviting me to join you today for what, as you say, is an incredibly important topic for our industry. Little bit of background, yes, this is actually my 41st year in the industry. I know you're immediately saying not possible, but it is true. I did start very young. And just for a little bit of context, air cargo today is transporting about $9 trillion worth of goods. So it's about 30 to 35% of global trade by value. Yet that only represents about 1% of global trade by volume. So clearly what we're moving around the world is of a significant value. Also, the way that the air cargo industry has moved on, or in fact, the global economy has moved on to the extent now that we're moving more than just boxes from A to B. When I started in this industry, it was literally moving a square thing from here to there. What it contained was really immaterial. Now, it's what it contains is the most important thing, whether or not that is pharmaceuticals, high-tech electronics, donor organs, whatever it is. So coming back to the long-winded way of saying that AI and the use of digital information is more critical with the industry today than it has been. So in a way, you're correct. What we're trying to do today with AI and other things is a continuum of where we have been for the last 2-3 decades, but the material need for it today is of a significantly higher perspective, in the sense that the impact of not having it can be hugely consequential for things like patient safety and economic supply chains.
But at one level, Oliver, isn't this right, that cargo is, exactly as Glyn describes, the ultimate analog industry? We've got to take stuff which is absolutely analog and shift it to another place, which is, I mean, until we invent teleporting, how do we interface the singularly analog world of aviation with the extremely digital world of AI? Where's the interface?
It's hard to tell. I don't know. Yeah, air cargo really is still quite an analog business. When I joined not so long ago, actually, I think I started 2017 in our Department of Aviation Logistics. Yeah, I quickly realized, air cargo is still lacking quite a bit behind compared to other industries, but you can also see that in a positive way. So there's still a lot of room for improvement, and yeah, AI can definitely help with that.
How? What can AI do?
Well, there's different ways. So, I mean, AI can help digitizing analog processes and processes that are analog as of right now. But of course, the full potential of AI can only really be achieved or yeah, used once the industry has moved really towards a more digital data exchange. And this is what we are working on right now as well.
Okay, so
And in fact,
we've
Andrew,
got to
if I
move
could just-
stuff. Oh, sorry, Glenn.
I was just going to say, I just wanted to add something to that last question, because one of the biggest significant differences when you travel through the aviation industry's passenger versus cargo is the passenger has a voice and it has feet. So we as passengers can determine our own path through the supply chain, and we can communicate in advance, as it were, with visa authorities, with security compliance. We can take things out of our bags, etc. If you then transfer those same requirements for border effectiveness, for upstream communications, for communicating with the customer, for communicating with supply chain partners, but from a cargo perspective, that box can neither move itself nor speak for itself. So this is really where, when you're saying, what can AI do? AI can take that digital information, which Oliver was talking about. If that information is digitized, then it can actually use that information and say, I know this box is going, to this particular transfer point, and I know when it gets there, it's going to need to have some cold storage because it's got very sensitive vaccines. So let me communicate with my equivalent of, from an AI perspective, in that transfer point, or in fact, it can notify customs at destination in advance to say, look, this shipment's coming through. It's a personalized treatment plan, so it really can't afford to wait 72 hours for border clearance. It needs to be pre-cleared. So an AI environment, if all the information were digitized, and this is, if it were a perfect world, all the information would be digitized. The communication tools would be to machine, doesn't need human interface other than disruption management or exception management. And then the AI environment can actually start taking over things such as predictive aspects, communicative aspects, and simplify the whole very complex structure and process that we currently live with.
Okay, let me interrupt you there and ask both of you, either of you. What we're talking about is digitizing the data. That's almost a tautology, I suspect. But historically, Glyn, you know this, we've done this on pieces of paper, and we've done this on pieces of paper that effectively the format and structure of which date back to the Warsaw Convention of 1929, when, of course, none of this was understood or expected. How far down that road of digitizing are we? I mean, what is it that we need to do? Do we need to go right back to zero and get every step in this chain to use exactly the same digital data formats? How do we do it?
Great question. The air cargo industry is actually older than the passenger aviation industry. It predates Warsaw, Chicago, and all of those other. And the very first air cargo shipment that moved was completely paper-free. There was no paper. Then mankind got involved and says, well, hold on a sec. I want to know what's inside the box. So we said, I need to have a form to tell me what's inside the box. I also need to know, where did the box come from? I need to know where it's going. I need to know if everybody that's touched it up till now has got the right clearances. I need to know what the dimensions are of this box. So we've added demands for information, and we've always focused on the lowest common denominator, which is, let's stick it on a piece of paper. Let's stick it on.
Who's the we in that sentence? We've added all these extra things. Who's the we?
The we is, and that again comes back from a complex supply chain. The we is us from an operational perspective. When I move the boxes around my warehouse, I've wanted to have a piece of paper to give to the forklift truck driver, to give to the dolly driver. We, as the border management agencies for customs, for security compliance, we have wanted to see a piece of paper there. It's also we as the customer. I want to know that you know where this is going to, so I need to see a copy of the transport document, which used to be printed in 12 carbonized copies with different colors going to different people. You remember those days.
The red carbon on the back. Always had the red
exactly.
Carbon.
That's the thing.
God bless.
So the information has just proliferated. So now the requirements that we need to move shipments around the world can be dozens of pieces of paper.
But so, Oliver, does that? I guess if you're a logistics master, dozens of pieces of paper represents a complete brand new field for you, does it? Does it represent an opportunity waiting to be taken?
I wouldn't really put it on the paper, but I mean at the end of the day, all the information then right now is collected through different documents, through different papers that certain people at certain stages need. It's all just a lot of times really the same information, just put a little bit differently. So the new and modern approaches to optimize this are really data-centric thinking. So not really thinking in documents, but thinking in terms of data that you need at a certain point of time. And for that, for example, new data standards like One Record can really help to exchange this data as it comes up, to exchange it via a standardized system or a data standard to exchange this kind of data. So this is really...
But surely that still requires all the data to be put into a standard format, doesn't it? At the point of entry, at the whichever we are talking about, at that point they have to do it in a standard form, surely.
So, I mean, to begin with, you would really write the data in a standardized data model that really covers all the data that really comes up during or throughout the whole supply chain. And then at certain points of time, if, for example, customs, they need specific data on where the goods are coming from, what's inside, the value, and so on, then they can pull this specific data that they need, pull that from this single shipment record, and then they basically have all the information they need.
So why aren't we doing that now?
Well, change takes time. And
but we've been doing this for 90 years. Glyn tells me that cargo's even older than passenger, and that's 80 something.
If you ask me, we would be doing it, I don't know, already a long time ago. But it's...
So Glyn, is there an international trade body that might, be able to work with everybody and get standard formats? Is standard formats the answer?
Honestly, I think, and I don't want to sound too general when I say this, but if you just look at what Oliver was saying, he's saying if it was up to him, we would be doing this for years already. That's, unfortunately, we don't have enough of people who think like Oliver throughout the industry. We still have people who think more like me, my generation, which is I need to see the four corners of a piece of paper and I need to see the whole story. Oliver has a much more modern approach to data, which is I don't need to see the whole story. I need to see elements of that data. And if you give me parts of that whole story in chunks of information, I can already use that and I can already share that and I can always receive from others and I can give to others. So they're creating a different culture and a different environment where it's actually about sharing data elements rather than the entire A to Z. Now, IATA as the industry trade body, you've got ICAO, first of all, as the overarching body. They have a mission as well to digitalize much more of the air cargo space. IATA, as Oliver mentioned, have industry standards. The One Record is the latest version. Originally, I was with IATA for a number of decades. We had cargo imp messages, which was very much about getting the full length of information, and then you send it, but in very restricted format.
Sorry, what was that called? What was that?
That was Cargo Imp, which is based on UN EDIFACT, which you will really need to Google. I mean, this is very, very binary, and it's got to be dusted off somewhere, but people are still using that. Some people then upgraded to XML, which is a little bit more flexible. But if you've got an XML message which has unlimited amounts of data that you can send, and it's being received by somebody who's in a Cargo Imp format, they effectively have to truncate the information, and then it's actually worse because now you've missed the key bits, because in my XML message, I've put all the cool bits that I need to tell you about the shipment and the temperature it needs to be stored at, for example, at the end. You've now taken it and you say, well, I'm only going to read the first 148 characters, and you've missed everything of value. So that actually created the worst of the worst. Moving to what Oliver was talking about, which is a different approach to using data, which is saying, no, if you have small bits, let's share that. There's no interpretation required now. It is literally the facts. So it's taking lots of small facts and sharing those small facts, not facts FAX, but FACTS, facts about the shipment. And then we can actually start getting some AI tools that can start applying some of the logic and intelligence to this. I have to say, though, to your point about industry standards, I think industry standards needs to be there to define, for example, that an airport code needs to be 3 characters, or that weight needs to be defaulted to 2 decimal places. Those are data element standards. But if we wait for the whole industry to say, right now, everybody, let's hold hands and all move forward together, that sadly is going at the pace of the slowest. And I think in this day and age where the technology is moving on so fast, we actually need to inspire and motivate people by showing them what is something that what is capable of. And then hopefully that motivates more people to kind of embrace the modern approaches. And policymakers have a role in this, but perhaps we'll get onto that.
Well, absolutely. But just before we get on to the policymaker point, moving at the speed of the slowest, I mean, I'm not trying to take a potshot here, but that has effectively been the decision that IATA / the cargo industry has taken for 20, 30 years now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's basically, it's very much similar to the ICAO No Country Left Behind. IATA's role as an industry trade association is to make sure that standards exist and that those standards are then communicated. But standards is really about capability. Capability never won an Olympic race. You know, as we've spoken previously, you know, Usain Bolt took the capability that I have, which is I can run, he can run. The difference between the two of us is about 8 seconds and 100 meters. And the way that he manages to get there 8 seconds quicker than me is, or did, hopping, he could still beat me, is by him taking that and perfecting and committing and basically just trying to inspire himself to exceed. And I think that's what we need in this environment. I know Oliver's doing a lot of work as well. And in IATA does things called hackathons, which, you know, I'll let Oliver explain, which is really a way of showcasing what is capable.
Okay, so are we at a place where everyone now, even IATA, has admitted that moving everyone onto a standard platform, which really only is sort of entry-level AI, isn't it? I mean, it's just data processing at that point, that we're not using fuzzy logic, we're not using extensive reanalysis, we're not using any of those sorts of things if we simply standardize the data. But if we've taken the decision that maybe it's time to move past that, and IATA has organized hackathons, is that the way to the future, perhaps, Oliver? What goes on at a hackathon? I've never been to a hackathon.
So a hackathon in general is really, let's say, a fixed period of time that you are given to solve some kind of challenge. And in the specific case of the One Record hackathons, it's pretty much the same. So you are given a challenge. They always focus on different things. For example, for the last time they focused on solutions around e-commerce, and then you're basically you get the challenge to optimize somehow e-commerce. You're using One Record, and that way you kind of let's say, use the full potential or show how the full potential of One Record could really help the whole industry to improve.
Well, let me go back to basics, Oliver, and ask you, just for clarity, what is One Record?
One Record, so it is the new data standard to exchange data in air cargo. It introduces a few different principles. So first of all, you will have a standardized data model, which is built around the piece. So information will be available at piece level. Then there are also some other design principles around that, but I will not go into detail with that. And then there's a standardized API. So it describes how people or actually machines should exchange data. So it gives you a few different requests that let you get data, that let you write data, and that let you change data that is written somewhere. And then there's also the principle of linked data, which is one of really the core benefits of one record. So the idea is that everybody in the supply chain writes information as it comes up, and they write it on their server. And then, for example, the shipper writes information about the piece. You know, he knows the volume, he knows the weight, he knows what's inside. And then if he contracts a forwarder that then is supposed to continue and actually ship the pieces, then he just writes information. For example, he plans the transport, plans the truck movement, plans the actual flight with an airline, and then they just link their different sets of information. So the pieces are then linked, for example, to the transport movement, which is a flight, but the data stays where it originally is at. So it's the data owner still has full control.
I guess the issue I'm trying to grapple with is, to what extent does this only work if the entire industry has signed on? That's sort of the gross question, if you like, the broad question. In the narrow question, to what extent can we use this, even if you're only operating your own little tiny business or your medium-sized business, as a cargo forwarder or as a shipper or an airline for that matter? To what extent is it possible for us to break away from the rate determining step of moving at the speed of the slowest player in the chain, and start to marshal the power of all this amazing computing power which is out there?
Andrew, if I can make a comment here, because actually I'm going to answer that also, but refer to a comment that Milan has just mentioned, which is absolutely correct, which is what we're trying to do in the mainstream part of the industry is replicate what the integrators have already been doing for the last few decades. By integrator, we're talking about a DHL, a FedEx, and a UPS. They own, effectively, they control within their own ecosystem the customer relationship, the pickup, the delivery to the airport, the clearance, they're self-handling, they obviously are flying, they're the operator, clearance at destination, final delivery through to the customer. They own the whole supply chain. So when they share information through effectively one ecosystem, one system. The notion of trust is, of course, built in because it's one company. When you throw into the fact that we have 1,000 airlines, 1,600 different airports with perhaps 2, 3, 4, sometimes even more ground handlers, 50,000 freight forwarders, 200,000 different trucking companies. The permutations and the variations that we have within the rest of the industry is huge. So to your point, Andrew, to go forward, if we wait for that entire industry to actually say, right now, can we share, are we able to adopt the common API, for example, the data sets, that'll never happen. What we need to get is little pockets. So if I'm an airline and I work with 1 or 2 major forwarders and I work through my main hub, I obviously self-handle, and perhaps at my main gateways at destination, 2, 3, 4 of those, I've got some common regular partners I use in terms of ground handlers. You can start then to create pockets where we're actually sharing the data in a way that we can then actually use it much more effectively. But to the whole point about AI, we are so far away from being able to harness the power of AI right now, because the sheer percentage of information that is still in paper form means that you'd only get a partial story. So if AI was to look at this industry, and as Oliver said, versus other industries, I think right now we are, what's the opposite of low-hanging fruit? High-hanging fruit. We're above the altitude where fruit grows. I think we're that far away right now. We really have to make some fundamental changes. This is where we briefly mentioned about the regulators and policymakers, and your knowledge of the various treaties and conventions. So if we go back to Warsaw or Chicago, whichever is the one that actually governed this, and I defer, Andrew, to your knowledge,
where they it's Warsaw, the one that requires what goes onto airway bills.
Exactly. So the Warsaw Convention, which basically stipulated in passenger travel that there just needed to be evidence of a contract. Didn't say anything other than just evidence of a contract. For the cargo equivalent, it actually stated there needs to be a paper evidence of a contract. So when the industry moved from paper tickets to e-tickets, it was really a relatively straightforward process. The enabling environment in terms of regulatory infrastructure was already in place. All that needed to happen was people needed to have a tool. So there's a limited number of GDSs, global distribution systems, that actually work with the travel agents to produce the information to send the digital ticket. And the last cog, which was the most important one, is IATA used to print hundreds of millions, billions of these tickets every year. And it just said, oh, we're not going to print them anymore. If we didn't print the blank tickets that previously was stuck in a dot matrix printer, which then churned out the information on the printer, and the old plates which you swipe to actually validate the ticket, you took those away, the industry was forced to make a change. Cargo saying, no, first of all, you have to have an enabling regulatory environment, so you have to adopt Montreal Protocol number 4 or Montreal Convention 99, which says that we don't need a paper airway bill to evidence this. Then you need to have country A and country B, both signatories to the same treaty, which facilitated that movement. Then you needed to make sure that all of the individual people who touch the piece of paper also then says, you know what, I can give up on that, which included customs officers. Still to this day, customs officers in certain parts of the world say, I want to see a blue ink signature. You've got certain warehouses that say, I need to see a piece of paper to move the cargo around. So all you need is one person in that entire supply chain to say, I want a piece of paper, that stops that entire movement through that supply chain of working digitally. And if you don't have all the information digital, as Oliver was saying, coming back to this, you can't really put an overlay of AI on top of that. Yeah, we've got to create the right environment first.
A number of things to unpack there, Glyn. The first thing is Montreal Protocol number 4, 1975, was an amendment to the Warsaw Convention to allow for the use of EDIFAX or some sort of electronic airway bill, or certainly faxed airway bills or something like that. And it took 25 years to be ratified. 25 years to be ratified, even though it is your sort of working definition of a no-brainer. Okay, so I think there's some really interesting questions about why is it that we let ourselves get to that place. But then your second point, that some customs inspector somewhere, not an agent, but a customs inspector somewhere says, no, I need to see blue ink and I need to see a signature. Oliver, can we work around that? Is there some way we can... what Glyn's just told me very depressingly sounds to me like he basically said, we're just going to keep going at the speed of the slowest boat, notwithstanding all the great work you're doing and hackathons and everything else. How do we break away from the sort of everybody has to do this together thing and move forward into a brave new world?
Well, to come back to your example of how could we, for example, get customs to maybe start accepting formats like One Record. I mean, that's something we are testing right now. Actually, to some degree, maybe in the future, even further, within the digital testbed Air Cargo, which is where we are testing different use cases within One Record. And we also plan to, in the future, actually work together with customs and basically help them see the benefits of this new way of data sharing. And I mean, if this data is available very soon and in a very high quality, I mean, that has to be in the interest of the customs themselves. So, I mean, if they can profit from that, if they see that actually the industry can provide this data already at a very early stage in a very high quality, I think that's basically how you can try to convince them to change. Yeah.
Are there, for want of a better word, are there should we be trying to focus on the high achievers, those that are doing well, and sort of use them as an example to point to others and say, look how successful it's been? Is that something we should be doing?
I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, that's, I guess, the way it works. We have to, the ones that know how to do it, they have to move forward at maybe a bit of a faster pace. to show the rest that it is working and that it's actually not so hard. I mean, it's not really technology or mechanisms that we are introducing right now. They're not really even that high flying. I mean, data exchange via APIs is not a very modern thing. It's actually very basic, and everybody's doing it right now, except for the air cargo industry.
Everybody except air cargo. Yeah. So,
It's
Glyn,
not
just picking
that
up on
bad.
something you said. Sorry, Oliver, carry on.
No, all good.
Okay. Probably as well that I spoke over your insulting of the entire aviation industry there. Glyn, just to pick up on something that you said when we moved to ticketless passenger travel, there were only half a dozen GDSs that were, really pivotal in the use of tickets and ticketing. There's no GDS equivalent in cargo, is there?
Well, there are what we call cargo data management systems. I mean, there are a lot of them. There's probably a dozen big ones around the world. So there's not a lack of technology. It really isn't a lack of technology today. The technology is there. And as Oliver's point, the standards are there. What is missing
So what isn't there?
The mindset's not there. And let's come back to the fact that we are humans. And as humans, we are flawed. We are motivated by different things, predominantly around the self-interest. So if I'm that customer, I don't want to pick on customers unnecessarily. So I'll use somebody else in the chain. Let's say I'm an airline. And today, I quite like the fact that my forwarder will ring me up. And he will ask me for a rate for a shipment, and I can check what my loads are, and I can go back with a quote, and I'm in control. I don't want to relinquish that to let his machine talk to my machine, and my machine to understand what my load factor looks like, what the various yields are that I can get on this, and dynamically price something. So we're going to have to motivate people, and that's where it's not just one size fits all. So each person, each entity in the supply chain, each individual has to be motivated. And I'm going to use a complete paralleling. WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp, when my kids first said to me, Dad, you've got to download WhatsApp. If I was the air cargo approach to that, I would say, well, what is the message protocol that you're actually using? How do I know there's a handshake? What is this? Who is this? Who set the standards? What are the standards? How will the information be encrypted? What will I need to do to unencrypt it? What are the costs of running this? What is blah, 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 blah. And I would have just gone on and on and on to the point they would have given up. Instead, my kids basically say, Dad, we want you to have on WhatsApp because we're sick and tired of you ringing us when we don't want to speak to you. So we're going to send you messages when it's good for us, and we'll share photos. Great. Focused on the benefits of it, and it was a done deal. It took 5 seconds to kind of overcome any potential objections. We're still too deep rooted in, you have to tell me why I have to change doing something I've been doing for 40 years. And this is where I'm saying that it's too easy in a way for me to say generational. Oliver and his colleagues and those that go to the hackathon, they are in the enlightened group. They don't need to, they will never say, I want to move away, force me to move away what I've been doing. They are the ones that saying, I want to throw away everything I've been doing because I know what I can do tomorrow is 500 times better than what I do today if I can use the data and the tools that are available. So sadly, it's a slow process.
Leave aside the better, leave aside all that other stuff. Isn't it going to be cheaper?
It's, this is one of those situations to digitalize information. It's cheaper. It impacts the bottom line, therefore cheaper, better cost. It impacts the top line because you can generate and extract more revenue from your product. You can optimize, you can make more efficient. You can have the user experience for the employee better. The customer experience is much better. You're much more transparent the way you communicate with your customers. Therefore, you will build loyalty, risk management of borders, the government's benefit. There's no downside.
Yeah, but apart from that, but to come back to your WhatsApp example, when my kids did the similar thing to me, because I'm not in the air cargo industry, I didn't want to know about protocols and all those things. I said, what do you mean? I can send these messages for free?
Yes, there you go. That's it.
I mean, why isn't the fact that this will be cheaper and more efficient and less error prone and all that other, why isn't that a slam dunk? Be as rude as you like, Glyn. Be as rude as you like.
Okay, well, I'm going to say it's because there's a lot of people that look more like me than look like Oliver. Honestly, I know that's too easy to say, and I don't mean that in a in a disrespectful way, because it's not only an age thing, but I think it is a set in your ways thing. If somebody were new to come in today and go into, I was in Hong Kong last week, and Hong Kong is on the forefront of e-commerce coming out. It's on the forefront of digital communications. But if you go into the handling facilities, and I'm not exaggerating with this, some freight forwarders, literally the guy walks in with his smartphone, he sits down, he shows the smartphone to the girl behind the counter or the guy behind the counter. They do a scan of it on a QR code, and within 2 minutes, he's gone. Then you have somebody else coming in, and I watched this. He came in with a shopping trolley from a supermarket full of document bags, document pouches, and it took him 2.5 hours to literally go through every single document. So for that person, you say to him, would you like to replace what you do with the smartphone? He's saying, no, my job is to bring the shopping trolley in of paperwork. If you make me go to the smartphone usage, I don't have a job anymore. You go to so everybody is self-motivated, and this is where, you know, we haven't really touched upon this yet, but I think it needs to be at a high level. It needs to be at a corporate standard.
I'm doing all this to get us to the place where I talk about what are the policies, what do we need, what are the policy, well, the policy implications I think are obvious. We're making it more complicated, we're making it slower, and more importantly, we're making it more expensive for something which is, what did you say, $9 trillion worth of value?
$9 trillion, that's the value of the cargo that's moved.
Yeah, sure, and we're just putting impediment in front of keeping that flowing. But our policymakers to date have been part of the problem, haven't they? Not part of the solution.
Yes and no. I'm going to be complimentary about policymakers now. If you look at certain policymakers around the world in the last few years, they've introduced things called PLACI, which is preloading advanced cargo information. This is whereby, and Europe is just going through a process now called ICS2. Sorry for so many acronyms, but it's really, yeah. So it's really where states and regulators say, before you even want to think about sending cargo or loading cargo to send it to us, we need to have, I think it's 7+2 or 8+2 data elements, which is part of the WCO safe framework, which is a minimum amount of data which will allow them to undertake some rudimentary targeting assessments. They predominantly want to avoid loading a box with a bomb on it onto a plane. So if it's coming,
where's their sense of fun?
Well, so literally that is already a leap forward to say we need those data elements.
But again, Glyn, you've put their WTO standards, aren't they?
Yes.
Not ICAO standards.
No, those are WTO, the safe framework. Sorry, WCO. WCO is
customs organization, the World Customs Organization.
Yes.
And then there's WTO, because all that stuff that we're moving, that $9 trillion worth is actually under the rules of WTO. It's just that little bit in the middle, the airframe in the middle, that gets jammed up in the ICAO process, which includes the Warsaw Convention, of course, which, yeah. Okay,
yeah, but even ICAO has done some great work, because if I'm, again, sorry for another acronym, a regulated agent or an RA, which means that I am a security approved entity somewhere in the world, and that if I ship some cargo, I actually, the airport or the airline and ground handler can trust that I have secured that cargo. So I need to prove that cargo is secured so I can transmit a electronic security consignment declaration, which then means that whoever receives that declaration throughout the whole supply chain knows that as long as that cargo has not been tampered with, Glyn secured it up front, and we agree with those standards. So those standards.
Come back to your Hong Kong example, then the chappie with and I assume it was a male, the chappie with the shopping trolley full of paper, he then wants that certification by you that you'd secured it printed out and put into his shopping trolley. Is that what happens?
Yes.
I mean, that sounds so easy and so obviously. I'm amazed we don't do this all over the world. At the Fraunhofer Institute for Material Flow and Logistics, this seems like an open field, doesn't it? I mean, there must be so much work you could be doing in this area.
Well, there is, and we are actually already doing it, and also coming back not directly to policymakers, but to governments and how they can maybe support, and how we are already getting support. For example, the Digital Testbed Air Cargo, which is a research framework funded by the German Ministry for Digital and Transport. Within that, we are covering a lot of different projects with the topic of digitalization of air cargo, also autonomization. But this is also where our One Record project is based in. And there, for example, we have developed an open source server. It's called Neon, and it basically implements the One Record data standard. So it implements the API description in the form of a server software. And that is open source and freely available to everybody. And the idea is that, so first of all, we wanted to develop it to do our own tests with One Record, so to see how the different industry partners that are active within the digital testbed air cargo, which is, for example, Lufthansa, Fraport, CHI, Sovereign, and so many more, how they can use One Record to exchange data. But we also wanted to provide this very basic piece of software, this One Record server software that everybody needs, provide that open source to kind of give the industry a push. And so, I mean, it does not only need to be the German government that can support the local, but also the worldwide industry through projects like that. And open source can definitely help with that. And we see that this can help by the great interest that this is actually taking within the air cargo industry.
Is it is getting pick up? People are interested in this?
Definitely. I mean, IATA currently is promoting Neon as the go-to solution if you want to start with One Record as a server software. We presented that during multiple IATA events. Last week in Hong Kong, we presented it together with Lufthansa as they announced their first live One Record use case, the shipment tracking case. And definitely, I mean, we hear of a lot of people that are already using it and that plan to use it in the future. So things like that can definitely help.
I mean, plaudits to the German government and to the Department of, what did you call it? Digital and Transport.
Digital and Transport, yes.
Digital and Transport, a fascinating combination. But
Yes.
plaudits to them. What happens if the French government and its Department of Digital and Transport, it'll have a different name, of course, sets up a similar project? Is that good or bad, do you think?
If they're not just doing the same thing, but from a different perspective, I don't know. I mean, they can. So, for example, for One Record, we see that there are a lot of great applications that you can provide that are really standardized, that everybody uses, that you can maybe then put your focus on. For example, we are also developing or have developed a solution called Neon Tag, and it's basically using information that is available through One Record and just providing a standardized view as an application. So for example, you can scan a QR code on a piece, and then it will pull all the information throughout the One Record network and pull that and make it available to the guys on the shop floor. So
okay, but I guess, I mean, I'm going to get to the brave new world of what we can actually do that's going to be helpful, instead of getting over the hurdle of the boring bit of getting the data standardized. But even though that's the hurdle at which we currently fall, how do I frame this question? Do we run the risk, and I use risk in a non-pejorative way, do we run the risk that we go back to where we've always been, but now we're using One Record as our standard piece, whereas previously we were using Edifact and those sorts of things as that? Do we run the risk of coming to the same, everybody has to use the same system, and consequently everything slows down point? If there isn't a French organisation and a German one and an American one trying to all be competitive with each other. Did that make sense, that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think from my perspective is the difference we have now is, to be honest, what you could do with that information. In the past, whether or not it was CargoImp or XML, you were really, really limited to just effectively take that whole string of information and just push it to the next person. That's it. You push it. And then you hope they push it to the person after them. And so the ability to do something wow or cool was really not there. It was just going through the same process as an airway bill, but just not a piece of paper, but running in parallel digital and hopefully slightly ahead. So it arrived before the cargo. What can be achieved through the one record aspect, which is once people are used to, and as Oliver was saying, you know, anybody in the communication, if you scan a QR code and then the tools extracts information from a limitless number of organizations or people that's got something of value related to that shipment, that already opens up the thinking to think, well, what if? And that's really where the cool stuff comes in, because this is still very rudimentary tools that are around that. But if you throw in an AI tool, and if you throw in other developments which are going on in the industry, for example, autonomous vehicles, and I'll use my example at the very beginning where we talk about moving vaccines around the world. One of the problems that we had moving the COVID vaccine around was Africa only has 3 cool chain facilities at major gateways through the whole continent, which meant the first vaccines which were shipped, which needed to be very controlled from a temperature perspective, could not be sent. It wasn't a case of people deliberately avoiding Africa. They could not be sent because they had literally 12 hours before they would be spoiled, and that wasn't enough time to distribute locally. So the need for cool chain facilities around the world are increasing, and therefore they are developing. So if we have a shipment of vaccine, let's say that it's coming out of India and it's transiting through the Middle East, and we get a situation where Oliver's talked about the data sharing through APIs and one record, that shipment is being tracked by all the machines that are interested in that shipment. That's customers, partners, the origin station, maybe the manufacturer. And all of a sudden now, one of the machines actually says, well, hold on, I've detected that this shipment, which needs to be controlled at between +2 and +8 degrees Celsius, is actually getting close to the 8. It's at 6.9, 7, 7.1. It's going up. We need to do something now. In today's world, that will not be uncovered until somebody gets to the end, reads a temperature sensor that's gone with the shipment and says, oh dear, it actually went to 9 or 10 degrees during its transit point. We've got to throw this whole consignment away. In an AI world, we could take the bits of information, data sensors, machine could actually respond. Ultimately, it might send a message to an autonomous vehicle sitting in that transit point and saying, right now, we need you to go and find this shipment, take with it a cool dolly, pick the shipment up, stick it in a cool environment, and lower the ambient temperature of that consignment because it's been heated by the sun directly. I mean, I'm throwing out almost a Star Trek type of environment here, but we have the various tools which are progressing at very impressive speeds for technology and automation and robotics, but there's nothing linking them to the actual shipment right now. They're in isolation. AI, digital information can link.
Right. Okay. I mean, a number of things come out of that. Oliver, what Glyn's just described is the aviation industry actually using technologies and devices not invented inside the aviation industry. We're really bad at that as an industry.
Is that a question?
Well, no, it wasn't actually, but I was hoping you might use it as a starting point.
Disagree with him, Oliver. Say that's
No, you
that's
can't
old
disagree with me
thinking.
on the point that we're
I mean,
really shit at doing it. But what
think-
you can do is say maybe this is the sort of thing we need to change. We need to change the way we've done things.
So I mean, in some parts, and like with individual solutions, people are already exchanging data, for example, via APIs, but it's always individuals that then create an individual solution for their individual problem. And the key benefit of one record is that once you've implemented one record, you will be basically via plug and play be able to connect to all the different players. So it will even further I mean, it will make you way more efficient in connecting to other players, and yeah, so that you don't have to maintain a lot of different interfaces.
But to come back to the point that Glyn sort of half mentioned earlier, in effect, though, what that means is that allows you and Glyn, as two people on one record, to develop something between yourselves for your consignments, for your business, for your whatever, and other people can either ignore it altogether or look on jealously at what's going on, and then decide that they too want to develop something. Is that, and that's absolutely not the way we did it for 30 years hitherto.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Isn't that what we have in the real world, Andrew? I mean, you drive a car that's different from the car that I drive, and if your car develops new technology, my manufacturer is either going to risk going out of business or either follow that use of technology and then eclipse it. I think we need differentiation, and we need that notion of inspirational innovation to set new boundaries and new standards. It's happening on the passenger side. You know, if you go onto some airlines when you book a flight, and you can click on a button that says, have a look at our economy meal, have a look at our economy seat. I'm still pleased just to get a seat inside the plane versus outside the plane. You know, the differentiation is there, but if you don't have that digital information in the first place, you don't get the opportunity to create these different streams of partners going through at a fast pace. And I think, as Oliver mentioned, a few people are doing something in Frankfurt. That's just a small percentage of people in Frankfurt with CHI, with Sovereign, with Lufthansa, and others, I'm sure, when they look at that and say, "Oh, can I join?" And others still are saying, "Actually, you know what? I don't want to join because I want to do my own thing and go even more." To me, this is fine because the API still means you can connect between networks and can connect between those who you may not, you know, have previously connected with. You can connect now.
So we run the risk of actually getting to a more competitive, more dynamic environment, having spent 20, 30 years prior to that effectively slowing everyone down. I don't want to labour that point because I actually want to spend the last few minutes looking at the upside and looking at the excitement and looking at the shiny new toys that we're going to be able to use. And as I very poorly put in a not question to Oliver, some of that will be integrating stuff from other industries, and you mentioned autonomous cars and so forth. Is the future bright? Is there a massive upside?
Definitely. I mean, there's so many great things we can do once we have all this data available. I mean, we talked about a lot of things already, but for example, something we are working on right now is cargo space optimization, both in the aircraft itself, but also on the ULD itself. For that, you need like very detailed information about the pieces, and AI can help a lot with that. And once data gets more, the data quality rises, and you are able to share this high quality data at a way earlier stage. This can help a lot, and that's just one example. But we are, for example, also, you know, if you think of demand forecasting, we hear from so many people currently that they, for example, some warehouses, they don't really even know what kind of volumes they can expect until the aircraft has actually landed and unloaded, run it in front of their door. And so, yeah, I mean, you don't even need AI for that. I mean, it's just and then if you think what AI could even do further beyond that, then yeah, it's, I think, a very bright future that we have ahead of us. Yeah.
Glyn, do you agree? Are we looking at nothing but upside?
And, you know, there are already autonomous vehicles driving around airports. You know, there are already autonomous tugs taking cargo to planes, moving baggage trolleys around. So, you know, that is already exists, but it exists in isolation. We also had a situation last week in Hong Kong where they're experimenting with an AI tool, which effectively is a 360-degree imaging. So you bring in a whole load of loose boxes on a pallet, it takes a scan, and then it tells you how to actually build up a pallet so that it's contoured to fit in the aircraft. Now, it can be done today by some very, very, very clever people who've honed their skills over decades to try and get, I'm going on to a 777, I'm going on to a 74, I'm going on to a 73 freighter. They've all got different contouring angles, etc., etc. But it's not as optimized as the AI. The AI will actually do it to the millimeter of precision rather than the rule of thumb and my years of experience getting it roughly close enough. This comes back, if you can optimize that space. Air cargo space is the most perishable thing on this planet in terms of an economic perishability. You know, a week-old newspaper still has more value than a space in an air cargo plane or a seat on a passenger seat. Once it goes wheels up, there's no more value you can extract from that seat. It's done. So the optimization before wheels up is huge. The tools, if the information is available, they can then go from commercial optimization to operational optimization and to everything in between.
So in the last couple of moments, let me just, a couple of things. We think we're on the right track now with One Record. We think that making it open source is a way to encourage people to come in and to experiment in their own way. We think that there's plenty of potential for people to think up using AI in ways we can't even think of yet that will improve what we're doing. So my last question, I guess, to both of you to come back and almost by way of summary, what do we need from our regulators and governments to make this happen better, more quickly, all those things? So maybe start with you, Glyn, and then Oliver, last word to you.
Okay. I think that's a great way to end. I think from a regulator's perspective, and it's interesting because policymakers can, for example, cover all sorts of different aspects. So if we're talking about the customs authorities in a country, they should actually say machine-based targeting is going to be a far more effective way of knowing the cargo that comes across our borders and making sure we collect the right amount of revenue and excise and duties on that cargo. So they need to look at that, and they actually fully need to embrace. And for this day and age, there's no reason why we should still have manual paper declarations for customs anywhere in the world. Does not make sense. From another perspective, which is how can we incentivize usage? I think this is also where you've got the advanced cargo information, which is actually prior to loading. That's again where the governments have actually adopted a number of programs, which is encouraging the industry to digitalize parts of information, but there is still not it's a stick and a carrot situation. I would rather see where governments say, if you are actually supporting this by giving me the advanced information electronically, I will give you, for example, some, I don't use the word monetary discounts, but for example, you might have a green channel at the customs, so you might be able to bring your cargo in much quicker. So I think there are levers. I think another aspect, which is something which perhaps also is more of the academic world as well, is what's going to take a change in mindset is a compelling case of benefits. And I don't think we as the industry have done enough to spell out the benefits. Maybe this is where you've got the academic world and could have a role to play in that as well.
Okay, so Oliver, are you a stick man or a carrot man?
I don't know, it's hard to say, but
do you agree with what Glyn said there? Let me put it, what do you think the regulators need to do?
I mean, Glyn already said so many great things, so I'll just keep it short and say, so support the industry in standardization actions like One Record, and try to help them invest maybe in open source solutions, because I think really that's the way the future will work.
Well, thank you. I think that's a very positive note to finish on. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your attendance. I hope you found this as helpful as I know I did.